So what is the song that we sing? In the midst of the Psalms, in the songs that we sing, we have a variety of songs that speak of the glory of God and of what God has done for us and of our need for God. What's the song that God's calling us to sing in the present time? I want to focus, I think there's a theme slide next. Yep. I want to focus a little bit on the words of Jesus. And we'll come back to the grain of wheat, but just those words from the gospel reading that Les read for us. And particularly what's caught my attention in the reading this week has been the grain of wheat falling to the ground, but I'll pick that up second. The ruler of this world is being driven out. And those who love their lives will lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it for eternal life. What's our understanding of what world there means? Because it's not talking about God's creation in the fullness of that sense. Rather, it's talking about the world as it exists, estranged from God's purpose and God's plan. So when he talks about the ruler of this world, he's talking about the way the world is organised and works, which is separate from God's plan. A bit like the light and dark in the Jeremiah painting. But it's interesting because the light and dark in Jeremiah's painting are actually reversed, because the light of the fires in Jerusalem is actually that's what's happened as a result. It's not the glory of God in those fires. The glory of God is actually shown in what Jeremiah writes about the law being written in our hearts. Something that's internal. But what's internal is affected by what's happening externally. In a commentary on this passage, I found a very helpful comment where they described the world in this sense as being the fallen realm that exists in estrangement from God and is organised in opposition to God's purposes. So it's something structural, the way the world works. It's a reality beyond human reality. It's a superhuman reality concretely embodied in structures and institutions that aggressively shapes human life and seeks to hold human beings as captives to its ways. So it's a world system that it's talking about. It's a culture, it's a way of seeing the world that's not from God's perspective. Now that's not something new, but I found it helpful in this passage. The ruler of this world, Jesus is saying that his death and resurrection and ascension will help us to break free from the world, the ruler of the world and the influence of that, which is working against God's principles. I then came across some writings of Jacques Ellul. He is a sociologist. He was a sociologist and also a theologian, a preacher, and all sorts of things that he did. And his comment was that it's technology that's causing us a problem. Now, what he's describing by technology is not just computers, cars, or anything like that. It's more an attitude. Like in the podcast I was listening to about this, it was describing in Paris after the war, in France after the Second World War, people were feeling devastated. And there was a whole rebuilding process that had to happen because of the devastation that they experienced. The Americans, though, they came in a little bit later in the process, came in triumphantly. And it was described as there's an attitude there of, if we put our minds to it, we have the technology and the ability to actually fix things up. So they came in with a very positive attitude. The French had to go through a process of rebuilding after devastation, a bit like Jerusalem had to after that devastation. A bit like after the disciples would have felt when Jesus died. But what he's talking about there, the technology that he's talking about, the way, that attitude, it's embodied in the technology that we use, but it's also a cultural mindset. And you can see it in some of the decisions that people make and where we put our hope. Because what Jacques Ellul suggests, that we actually put we make sacred that which we think will fix us. Now, who was it that said our buildings shape us? Was that Churchill or someone else? Remember? I remember the quote, but I can't remember who said it. The design of our buildings shape our life. I think that's what Ellul is talking about with technology. It's not that technology is wrong, but if we see technology as solving all our problems, all we need to do is fix climate change and we'll be right. Does that really get down to some of the things that are deeper in our heart and our relationship with other people? I'm not saying climate change we don't need to deal with it, but it's that sense of if we just get the technology right, things will be okay. If we just cure cancer, if we just, get rid of poverty, if we, can grow enough food to feed everyone, that everything will be okay. And that's the mindset that we can become part of. So then anything that actually is not thriving is then seen as being something we need to look away from, and what we value and what we look to. And this is what Ellul's saying. In the end, we can make technology, and that's that broader sense of technology, the sacred, the thing that we look to save us. But there's something deeper inside that Ellul is talking about that we need to find, which is about what God is offering us as sacred, as values that are about something different. The other thing that Ellul says is that we've actually become much more into technology as far as describing the world than following nature. Our sense of things dying and rebirth and this grain of seed going into the ground and growing again, that cycle of life, we've moved away from that to see things differently in a more technological way, particularly with medical problems and all those sort of things. So when Jesus is talking about glory and really saying that he could turn aside from the path that he was on towards Easter, but the voice from heaven was saying that I've made my glory visible before and I'll make it again. And really the path that Jesus was on was one that would reveal God's glory, gives us a different understanding of glory than what we usually think of, particularly within our cultural context. So what does it mean to think of glory in that way that Jesus is talking about in this passage? I want to show you a photo. Thanks, Sandra. No prizes for guessing what the photo is it? Except for maybe Heather, who's visiting. But I'm sure you've been to the church there, Heather, at some stage when you visited Dawn, so you'll be familiar. The fence is a new addition, but we're excited about it. Now, who can tell me what's in the wall on the right end, on the Charman Road end of the church building? A foundation stone. Yep, what else? Downpipe, yep. See, they're all the things we look at. The door at a toilet, yep. In the actual building itself, before the fence went in, we looked at that and thought, that's the church, right? Okay, I'll show you the picture from the other side, which is the next one. Okay, so it used to, for those who haven't been there, used to be that you would come in the front door from Charman Road, the double doors there, and you come in through glass doors that are at the double doors, and then you come through other glass doors once you receive your hymn book and your order of service. You would come through the double doors into the church building. That's actually Alan Millard there. It's almost like the Jeremiah, isn't it? He's thinking seriously about something, because we're in there working something out. And we're all thinking seriously about it. Now, what can you tell me about the narthex? The narthex is that area that you come into before you come into church. Any feature that strikes you from the narthex, from that picture, photo? The strips of stained glass windows. Very good, David. The next, that wall, the glass that was in that wall was not a glass that should be there. It's one of those glasses that if something broke up there, you would have a shard of glass that would come down, which is not safe. So the glass had to come out. We could put timber back into it. That didn't seem like a good option to block that off. We could pull the whole structure out and open it up and make that end when we face worship that way, because the design is that we can face worship to the south, if I get the right orientation here, to the south or to the east, depending on which way we wanted it for a number of purposes. And the original plan was to put a curtain across at the bottom of that wall with the glass, so that when we're facing that way, we would have a curtain behind, and we wouldn't be distracted by some of the things that were happening behind. So we decided to pull the structure out rather than have it there without glass or trying to replace it with something else. And this week on Tuesday, those of us who went, this is what we saw. Thanks, Sandra. Now, that photo doesn't really do justice to us, because the light that's on the right in the picture there is actually affecting the lighting of the windows. The light was coming in through those stained glass ways in a way that was really amazing. All of a sudden, removing that wall was a way of actually opening up a whole different perspective from what we had seen before. And we're looking now at how we can enhance that space, particularly when we're facing in that direction as we use the building. Because the idea is that we can use the building in any particular way. There's no one focus. It can be done for a multi-purpose, but that one of the ways would be towards that. Now, in my reflections this week, I thought, isn't that like the glory of God? The glory's there all the time, but we can't always see it, because sometimes there's something in the way that's reflecting and refracting the light, and we're just not seeing it in the way that God wanted. And until we actually get rid of that's barrier that's in the way, we really struggle at seeing the glory of God and recognising. I think that's what Jesus is saying to the disciples and to the people that read this reading from John today. There are things that can distract us, and we can go into a whole lot of detail of what that was for the disciples in the context of when Jesus was speaking to them. But for us today, are the things that actually can distract us. And one of those is the culture of the time that we live in is so pervasive that we actually can look at God in ways that are very much a reflection of the culture rather than of what God is saying to us beyond the culture. And to be open to what God's revealing to us is to catch what the prophet Jeremiah was trying to say to the people. God's got a particular way of leading us into the future. But we need to be able to see it and to respond to it. The next one, thanks Sandra, should be a theme slide. Yes. So the seeds. See, what Elul is saying is that we've actually, the way that our culture goes, I actually noticed, some of you have found this before already. I saw a news article today of describing what it's like to let your hair go, let people to see that your hair has actually gone grey. And the impact of that. I haven't read the article, but I thought, interesting. Because the headline was, I've become invisible. Why would someone say that? Because there's a whole set of things that is seen as being successful and of being what we aspire to, some of which is around our appearance and our age and the things we're still able to do. But Jesus is saying God's love for us is not dependent on what we can do. And we can be distracted from recognizing that because of the culture and the emphasis and the values of our age, which is what Jesus was talking about. The ruler of this age will be overthrown. People will be set free from that. That's what we live in after Easter, after resurrection and ascension. We have access to that. But we've got to keep reminding ourselves that the culture is so powerful that we can be distracted by the culture and to be aware of what God is saying to us beyond culture. The other thing is that these grains of wheat, the life cycle is a natural part of life. And we can, now who was it? Walter, was it Beck? Wrote the book Denial of Death. I think Beck was his surname. Can't remember his first name. Denial of death. That we live in a death-denying culture. But see, if death is part of nature, then we need to be looking for the way that God has created and the way things evolve. So, Jesus is saying a grain of wheat. Now, the question, will we plant our seed in the ground? I thought everyone who wants one can take one of these home, if you would like. But I would suggest you don't try and grow wheat from it. Very good question, Elizabeth. I assume I bought these because they were dried wheat for artificial arrangements. I assumed the drying process would suck all the life out of the wheat, so I assume it wouldn't grow. Is that right, Elizabeth, or not? No. Well, look, here, can you test it?
But how do I know if it's alive or not? I mean, if I
No. Plant the seed and see what grows. Yes, you don't have to tell me today. It's an experiment. Anyone else that wants to try, because it's an interesting experiment. But I wonder whether because...
I think it will.
Well, there might still be enough life in it. It'd be interesting to know. But you see, what's happened is, because we want to use this in artwork, flowers and things like that, it's dried out because that works better.
That's the normal process, it just dries out.
Well, that's true. So it depends whether the drying out is a deeper drying.
Just by leaving it will dry out normally.
Well, that's a...
Put it in a heat thing for a week.
Okay, so dry doesn't mean it's actually been stuck in a dryer.
What's in our bins? Come on.
Well, that's true. Yes.
That's waiting to go into the ground in April.
True, yes. Interesting. Good thought. So we can experiment and see what happens. But if it would germinate, and whatever, if we had one that would germinate, and if this one will germinate, that'd be good. That seed, it's actually got to die. And I think what Jesus is saying to us that...
It doesn't die, it dries out.
No, when it's in the ground... We can talk about the detail later. But what Jesus was saying, when it's put in the ground, it's hidden. It's died. Well, died in the sense that it's hidden. And then it comes to life. And grows. And out of that grows a whole lot more seeds. And I think there's a message there for us today, that we can try and make beautiful arrangements, or we can actually plant seeds and grow more wheat and be fruitful. And I think that's what Jesus is encouraging us to do today. So if you want to experiment, feel free to experiment. If you want to just use it as something to reflect on, feel free to take one afterwards. And I'll put them over there so that you don't have to, so that you can easily get one of those afterwards. Unless a grain falls to the earth and dies, it remains a single grain. But if it does, it bears much fruit.